Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer, and joining me today for Daily Global Insights is my co-anchor Sri Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji, Namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Namaskar, good morning, Sriji, and looking forward to another good session. And good morning to everybody, and good evening to those in India.
Sridharji, just as we had predicted several DGIs ago, the action has now shifted to Japan, areas around Japan and Taiwan. Can we just start with that, sir?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Please go ahead.
Well, I think there was over the weekend patrol exercises conducted by the Chinese as well as the Russian forces. This is the Russian strategic missile carrier along with the attack forces of China, and they focused the patrols on across Sea of Japan and East China Sea. What is important about Sea of Japan is the Kuril Islands. We talked about the Kuril Islands being the previous one. The Kuril Islands being right up there. You can see above Hokkaido, which Russia claims as is. And that's been an area of dispute. You can also see just to the left of Sea of Okhotsk, the Sakhalin area. That's where there's a big Gazprom oil pipeline platform. And Japan and India are stakeholders, and Japan have not exited the Sakhalin. So therefore, you can see that China and Russia taking a slice on either side with Taiwan squeezed in between. Now we go to the next map. Yes, the East China Sea. Where is East China Sea? You can see East China Sea. It is the south of Japan, and where that is the Diaoyu Islands as the Chinese claim, and Senkaku as the Japanese claim. That's the entry point of the contention, and then that spills into Taiwan. So it actually is in the Taiwan Strait. So these patrols were conducted. I mean, people raised alarm, and United States obviously raised alert. Both China and Russia said it is within its rights to conduct exercises as the US and other forces do, and it followed the international guidelines. But
Sridhar,
yeah.
Go ahead, sir. You finish your thought. I thought you were done.
No, looming conflict. Sorry, I'll hand it over to you, Sriji.
Sridharji, did I hear you say that India has a stake in Sakhalin Island?
Sakhalin project, the Sakhalin 2 gas project. I think India has taken a stake.
Okay, so now if there's a conflict, India might get drawn against Russia if this were to happen, or the next step happens.
Well, both Japan and India has a stake. They have decided not to exit. I mean, India is a new stake which they have taken as a result of Chevron exiting from that. If you recall, we covered that in DGI. But Japan has stayed the course. Japan somehow still believes that it can work with Russia in the interest of the strategic implications, both from an energy requirement and from economics perspective. Now, Russians don't seem to work that way. And clearly the island of Kuril up in the Hokkaido, up above the Hokkaido Islands, it'll gradually creep itself into Japan on the upper northern sea of Japan, Sriji.
For those of you who are history buffs, the day Japan surrendered to the Allied forces in 1945, that day or the next day, Russia declared war against Japan over Kuril Islands. So this is not a new dispute. It's been around for many, many years. And, we'll have to wait and see how it goes. But having India now becoming a stakeholder there, it adds something, a new dimension in this whole thing. We'll have to wait and see. But before we go to the next news item, may I request all our viewers to please like this video so that it has the best chance to go viral. We have several such path-breaking developments that we want to share with you. And now let's take a look at what is happening in the US markets yesterday. Sridharji, first off, the markets did very well because the Fed has messaged that they messaged something. Please go ahead, sir.
Well, Fed has basically confirmed that they will go with what you call a deaccelerated rate hike. So that means instead of 75 basis points, they may go with a 50 basis. So reduce the pace of acceleration of the rate hike. That gave some momentum to the markets yesterday, which is namely Wednesday. The futures are still digesting, and it is futures is still trading lower. But let's wait and see. There's two important data that's likely to come out on Thursday and Friday. Thursday is the personal consumer expenditure, and then then tomorrow there's employment data. Both will reflect the sentiments in the market. If you are following very closely the US and the global market, I'm excluding India in this, there is tremendous amount of layoffs going on right across the spectrum of industry. It's just not restricted to technology, but it is across a spectrum. Probably services sector is the only exception. Otherwise, in the core production manufacturing jobs, and also in some of the areas where there is demand contraction possibility, you are seeing the job reduction going on or the job slices going on.
And Sridharji, WTI crosses $80 and Brent crosses 87 and natural gas crosses $6.95 from the lows of 5 in October and 9.68 on 19th August. So natural gas went up and then it has come down a little bit, but again, it is showing signs of going up. Can I recap for us how the three prices have been moving for this year from like January up until now, sir, and how you see this thing play out?
Well, I think that we have come from the lows in January. January is the period where we saw pre-Russian invasion of Ukraine. So if I have to kind of look at the numbers, let me just give you a quick look. So the oil kind of averaged, we started the natural gas around $3.80. We went up all the way up to $9.60, and we have now come down to about $6. It's still substantive, which is the reason why you saw a peak inflation, and then there is a slow reduction in the inflation in that segment of the industry. Similarly, we started the WTI crude around $76 around January 4th. We went up to about $90, and before we made our way down. And we again went up due to the post-invasion and a lot of questions around the supply issues. Similarly, the Brent behaved. Brent, in fact, went up to $125 to $130. That was around the July-August timeframes, and it has come back down to it came down below $80, which we covered 3 days ago in DJI, but it's now making its way towards the $90 for two reasons. One, is China going to come back and there's going to be consumption? Remember, these things are future trades. These are not spot trades. And then the second question that props up is the OPEC going to continue to restrict its supply, forcing the price up? The reason is Russia is collaborating and instigating with OPEC because of the price cap that the G7 and the G20 nations are trying to impose on all buyers.
And a majority of Chinese think that the Taiwan Strait conflict is going to flare up very, very soon. This is a poll that has been conducted in China. Sridharji, right now they are being buffeted with this, zero COVID policy and the aftermath of that, and the fire in Urumqi and so on and so forth. The lingering question is how reliable are these surveys?
This seems to have been conducted by China-Japan Forum, and I I think it's the Galleon group is one. I don't remember the second one. These two groups have conducted on either side to see the sentiments of the people from between China and Japan, how they view, because just now we gave you the graph as to anything in the Taiwan Strait is going to impact both the countries. Around two questions, basically around two specific themes. One is the war likely? More than 55% of the Chinese think the war is likely. And in the case of Japan, they think 30 to 40% of the people think it is likely. The second question was around the invasion of Ukraine and whether that will dimmer the hopes. Exactly the opposite. Many people in China, close to 65% think the war in Russia, the war by Russia in Ukraine is justified because the NATO was trying to unduly put pressure on the sovereignty and security of Russia. Exactly the opposite in Japan. Over 75% of the people think the war is unjustified because Russia is not adhering to the international norms and rules. It's attacking a sovereign nation. So you can see that they have, this is a poll not conducted by, usually the polls are not conducted in China. Somehow they have allowed this to be conducted. This is the Japan-China Forum that has conducted the poll. And for whatever it is worth, depending on the samples, this is the outcome that has come out. But it very clearly reflects the diametrically opposite views of the two nations on issues that is both closer to their homeland and a little bit away from their homeland, how divergent the views are.
And viewers, stay with us because we have some breaking news concerning Twitter, and this is really, really big. But before that, let's take a quick look at what is happening around the world. Chinese citizens and others join in opposing the zero COVID policy of China, and the death of Jiang Zemin calls for CCP leaders to be held accountable for atrocities and human rights violations. See that he was a PhD, wasn't he? Mayor of Shanghai.
Yes, he was a PhD. I had the pleasure to work with him for about four years during his time in Tsinghua University, but post more around the economic reforms during the time that I spent in Asia, particularly around the China in the banking and especially around the trade finance side of the business. These are times I'm referring to when there was no economic zones and nothing. We all had to stay in Hong Kong and go to Beijing and then come back. But it's very different right now. He's, when you look at him and work with him as just as a professional, then it looks very different. But in terms of his specific policies, he's an intellect. There's no doubt. He also had a brief stint in Harvard. He has lectured in Harvard. That doesn't mean anything, but it just means that he has a stamp from the Harvard side. But he's identified as someone who had oppressed the Falun Gong, if you remember who the Falun Gong are.
Yes.
And targeted and was responsible for big human rights violations. They also want the Jiangxing province aspects to be, because now the dissent is coming out. So these two things prop up, and then in conjunction with the dissent that is coming out, as you rightly pointed out, around the zero COVID policy. The zero COVID policy really has now seems to have gained momentum and traction around the world. How Xi Jinping is going to deal with it is an interesting position. There's a very close correlation between Xi Jinping and Jiang Zemin. Xi Jinping maintained a two-level. One, he had the army, and then he had the general secretary and the presidential. We discussed this in one of the DGIs.
Yes.
How Xi Jinping collapsed it and made sure, and he became Emperor Xi. That means there's only one person, that's the president, who presides over the general secretary, who is over the army, and who is over the political apparatus within China. So this is where their correlation is. Their principles are similar. And he's the guy who broke the Jiang Zemin's kind of theory or the model in China.
And now, some breaking news from the United States. Former Twitter executive who censored the Hunter Biden story admits mistake. This is one of the first areas of the new GOP controlled House that's going to start happening. Sridharji, this is a first. As always, we are first with the story. Talk to us a little bit about who this person is, sir. This is not, I don't think this is Vijaya Gadde or Jack, is it?
No, Yoel Roth. Yoel Roth, who was in New York, had the oversight for the censorship. He's one who was responsible for stopping this story. This is the New York Post article. Again, we covered this in DGI. If you go back, we covered this, which is effectively to say that this was to have come up and then it just got censored. And actually, New York Post was censored for almost 20 days on the back of this article, fearing. And those who tried to exchange these links all came up to say that this link no longer exists or sorry about it. Now, there are two versions to the story. One version to the story is they said that, this is Yoel Roth's version, that they couldn't corroborate. So therefore, the direction, internal direction was to quell the story. As far as Jack Dorsey, he had a briefing to the Congress. He said his version is whether the story was a hacked version, as a result of this being a hacked version, whether there is any truth, and there was no corroborative mechanism for them to establish the truth, so they stopped it. It's very momentous on the eve of the elections. And we are now going to see all this is going to be made public by Elon Musk. This is also going to come out through the GOP investigation of the close collaboration of the tech industry in California, where the progressives and the Democrats to suppress a number of stories, and anyone expressing dissent, how they were knocked out. So this is going to come out both from an inquiry plus all the data that is going to be released by Elon Musk.
And viewers, a couple of days ago, in fact, for the last 2 days, we have been covering stories about Twitter, in and around Twitter. And there is another interesting story coming out. Florida governor, we said this again 2 days ago, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis asserts that Apple is acting as a vassal for CCP amidst protests. He also stated that Disney brought it upon itself, the woke agenda, and glad that now Bob Iger is back to reset it. First, let's touch upon Twitter and then talk to us a little bit about what happens in Disney, sir.
Well, I think what the Disney is, Twitter is very clear that the Twitter agenda was not endorsed, accepted, and Florida was prepared to act against it. Florida was prepared to take action against all those tech companies who were pursuing the progressive agenda. So he's gone on the offensive, effectively to say Apple has collaborated or partnered somehow with CCP, and we covered some of the issues that is going on in the Foxconn factory, and basically, became a tool for the advocacy of the CCP agenda. So he's gone on record to state that in one of the public meetings. And he also said that Elon Musk and Twitter must look at the Apple relationship and assess whether it is conducive in terms of the strategic aspirations that Elon Musk has. So he has deep dived into this. He didn't stop there. He now went ahead and went into the corporate. If you all are following Disney, Disney has been going through some very challenging, both on the content, which is especially around its digital content consumption, which is a subscription business, as well as some of the issues in the theme park, especially around many things on the woke agenda, transgender, facts, what should be the critical race theory, education, even some of the sex-related matters, which they wanted to take it up to school-level education. And Florida banned all of this in the state. not acceptable. So Disney faced some interesting challenges internally and in some of the businesses within the theme parks. So there was a board coup, and the previous CEO was ousted, and Bob Iger is back. He's acknowledged the mistakes. He has indicated we should not have done things against the government. It's not that I don't support some of these items. He said we should not be talking, but we should also be listening to what our constituents who come to us are saying.
And viewers, if you have not been to Florida, there's a town called Orlando. It's about 50, 60 miles from Cape Canaveral. And Orlando has, I think, 5 or 7 Disney theme parks. I mean, you can take a week vacation in Orlando and go visit one theme park every day. So it's a very, very probably the biggest theme park of Disney across the world, because there are no other cities that I know of where Disney itself has 7 or 5 theme parks. Anyway, just wanted to let that information out. Biden administration approves rules that admit funneling workers' retirement funds into left-wing causes. More than 19,000 millionaires who filed tax returns with incomes of more than 1 million in the year 2020 walked away with unemployment benefits. The estimated amount exceeds $250 million. This PPP has been much abused, Sridharji. I don't know how much of it's going to be clawed back.
Gee, we haven't come to the PPP fraud as yet. We'll touch on that separately. We'll touch on that separately. This is the 600 to 650. You remember the $600, the state and the federal, everybody will be given money. You will get the checks if you just simply claim that you are unemployed. So these are the people. Some astonishing data has come out. Make hay while the sun shines. There are even 200 people in the 5 million to 10 million reported earnings to the IRS who have claimed unemployment benefits. Really shame on them. Really shame. It is just the abusive of the system. But it's an astronomical number. PPP is reserved exclusively for Sri IRG. So we will do a separate session. That's even a bigger fraud in terms of how people, claim, and that could go into 500 to 600 million and even probably few billion, Sriji, in terms of the level of fraud. We'll do that separately.
Sridharji, the deserving ones didn't get much help from PPP, sir. That includes P Gurus. We really didn't get much. In fact, we got a loan that we are paying back. Anyway, time talk for a different.
Always, the fraudster get away, the guy who really needs. But mind you, PPP was very, very helpful. It stemmed lots of things. But when you have a scheme where you put somewhere between 500 to $250 billion, $750 billion into the system at such ferocious kind of velocity, it's bound to have broad consequences on the fraud. As far as 2020, 2021 is concerned, it did invert and put economy back on track. But whether it has created enough long-term damage, we will know in the next couple of years. It certainly has created. We are well past the 31 trillion marks in terms of the total debt, because we have borrowed the hell out of the world, well beyond our means, and all these things will bite. But PPP will reserve it for another day, Shinji.
Okay, sir. Now, Democrats have elected Hakeem Jeffries as the new House Minority Leader, succeeding Nancy Pelosi. He is the first Black American to lead a major political party in Congress. Is there something more, sir? Is he also a member of Squad?
He is a progressive. He led the impeachment of President Trump. He's got some very interesting policies and thoughts. And he is a New Yorker from Queens. So I will also add to that story. So he's our fellow neighbor, county-wise. So therefore, yes, he's a New Yorker, first African-American or Black American, as the media is quoting, as Hakeem Jeffries would say, unanimous closed door, unanimous consent, he was elected the leader, the first black leader to be elected of House, majority or minority on either side.
Let's hope that America doesn't head back to Tammany Hall politics, sir.
We're going downhill, Sriji, very, very fast. You know it and I know it.
European leader Emmanuel Macron becomes the first EU leader to visit US and have state-level discussions on Ukraine, energy, trade, China. Climate appears to be on the top 5 agenda items. The Russia-EU-China tensions continue, with Lavrov issuing warning that the European security apparatus is now West influenced and is thwarting peace. I don't know what he means by that. Sridharji will expand. NATO Secretary General wants EU on economic dependency on China and asks EU to exercise restraint. Is this a message to Germany, sir?
It's a message, very clear message to Germany. You want to know the dichotomy of Europe?
Yes.
As you just heard it in the last 2 minutes or last 75 seconds. It's a mess. It's a smorgasbord of inconsistencies. Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, goes. His own party, his own constituent members, including his economic minister, opposes, but he goes and does stuff. Then Jason Stoltenberg, the NATO guy, says, if you go and dealing with China, you're calling yourself into deep trouble. Now, Mr. Macron is the first EU leader to be hosted by Mr. Biden. No other person has turned up as yet, but he's the first leader to turn up, and full state honors, and he's going to be treated very well. So 5 items on the agenda. Now the question, therefore, is, he's obviously he's one of the supporters of the Biden's policy on Ukraine war, and notwithstanding the fact he still stands by that negotiation is the key. Germany is looking after itself. It is not in the business of trying to intervene in any manner because I don't think it has the capacity. With regard to Lavrov's point, apparently there is an organization for security and European cooperation, OSEC it is called. Now this is usually the Russians and post-World War II, usually the Russians and NATO kind of get together and sit and discuss common issues, etc. This has not been functioning, and this is Lavrov's sore point, which is to say West, which is effectively Biden administration, has hijacked the agenda to such an extent that there is no dialogue at all taking place, thwarting any attempt to secure a peaceful solution to the Russia-Ukraine war. This is his point, Sriji.
And now let's take a look at how India has been performing economy-wise. India reports Q2 GDP numbers, and the lower number of 6.3% is in line with the market expectations. For the first half, in line with the Q1 numbers of 13.5%, the H1 GDP for fiscal year 23 will be at 9% plus, and in line with the projection of 6.7 to 7% for the full year. China is, let's talk about this, Sridharji. Take it away, sir.
Well, I think there are 2 versions to this. There is one version. If you read the Western press, when I use the word Western, left liberal Western press, okay, Indians generally try to generalize everything with one coat of paint. There is left liberal media, then there is the right media. Okay, there's no centrist. We have lost centrism in the world. Full stop. Doesn't matter. It includes probably India. So therefore, you have left and you have right. So if you take a left liberal media, the narrative says very clearly, India has lost the plot, and it has basically not been able to contain the inflation and the runaway credit costs, rising interest rates. And in the process, its economy has contracted 6.3%. And so it may be having challenges to meet its target. That's rubbish. India has managed its inflation. We have given the numbers at 7.45% or so. It is still lower than all the developed economies in terms of the inflation. So, but remember, this is a correlative data between quarter to quarter. So the second quarter data was expected because the first quarter data was coming off the highs of lows of the COVID and positive momentum on exports. Then the oil prices and the other things kind of kicked in, dimmed. So there was a small contraction, but factored in. So when you take into account the first half, I think they will probably finish around, I don't know, 9.5% aggregate GDP. Then they will finish the year, depending if you talk to IMF, they will say 6.7%. If you talk to the finance ministry, they will say 7%. Be as it may, 6.7% in the present circumstances when the world is struggling to grow at 2% or go at negative minus percent, I think India has managed both its inflation as well as the economy very well because it has managed the supply side issues rather than focusing. Supply is what triggers. One ex-Fed governor, Dr. Roger Ferguson, was very right. In 2 days ago, I listened to his interview. He made the point. Fiscal tool will not solve the inflation problem. Only supply chain issues will solve the inflation problem, and that needs to be addressed. This is what India has been kind of working on. So, on the economic side, those headline numbers, one should not read it as negative. It is still 6.3, even if it finishes at 6.7%. Dr. Panagaria thinks that India will grow at 8%. Will finish FY23 at 8%. But he was is an economic czar, and he was a former NITI vice chairman. So be as it may. So you have a wide range of percent. It's still a very good percent in terms of very good growth number as far as India is concerned.
And viewers, you would have seen the interview I did of US Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, and he has now chimed in saying that China is building outposts along the LAC, and his intent is to have a continued aggression. This is the first time I think I'm seeing Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy making a statement, sir.
Thanks to you, Sriji. You interviewed him, and you certainly have done your good work in terms of changing his mind. He has used the satellite imagery and the data, which basically says that, hey, a few outposts have come up. The Indians will say, oh, thank you so much, Congressman. And thanks to US previous administration, the present administration, we have been tracking this very closely. These fellows, come up and pop up, and they are popping up all the time. They're not going to go away. Now, mind you, this is Raja Krishnamurthy, the House, and including the Ministry of Defense. Now, China is saying very similar to Lavrov, hey, don't rake up the issue between India and China. We are trying to sort and we are trying to work together to address the problem. In my view, China never solves any problem. China only solves the problem with a solution in its favor, not solution against it.
Well, at some point, someone's going to call their bluff. So let's wait and see if Mr. Modi does it. So next, moving on, the UN General Assembly voted Wednesday afternoon in favor of holding a commemorative event in honor of the 75th Nakba Day, the Palestinian name for Israel's establishment, which translates to catastrophe. As Benjamin Netanyahu takes charge, US and Israel to conduct largest military drill eliminating or simulating striking Iran's nuclear program. Sridharji, this is as close to like a threat saying that you do anything more, we are going to take out your nuclear facility, sir.
Well, I think I want to give two observations. First is on the last point. I think that if United States doesn't come in, Israel will do it on its own. Okay, so I hope the progressives, which have a strong lineage towards both Iran and Palestine, are sensible enough, are not going to screw up this specific effort and do information kind of leakage. But anyway, that's my kind of assessment and observation. But the exercises are going to be conducted. Israel is too smart. But the great news for us is Mr. Netanyahu coming back into, and he's beginning to make some very strong statements as he's now the invited and prime minister to be of Israel. With regard to this Nakab, this is basically saying creating Israel and alienating Palestine was a big issue. They want to commemorate United Nations now is a woke, so it has no bearing on the final outcome. The United 40 or 44 countries abstained. All the major Western nations vetoed or negated. Just a basically show of numbers that turned up, which is to condemn Israel and support Palestine. Remember, Mr. Modi also made a statement, which is to say, we support the aspirations of the Palestinian aspirations. That's all he said. How he is going to square that off with his very good friend, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, will soon come to know as the days move on.
And next news is Turkey is almost ready to invade northern Syria and attack the Kurdish YPG targets upon a cabinet decision. Can we have the map, please? Sridharji, take it away, sir.
Yes, so we had touched on this, but now it is imminent. They're just waiting for the cabinet decision. So just trying to show you what is the area that they're going to invade. You can see the maroon. That is the Kurdish people or the YPG. It is the YPG or the Peshmergas. That particular group comprises of Kurds, Arabs, and a whole other constituents, which are fighting both the ISIS, but also fighting any kind of attempts by Turkey to occupy this part of Syria, the northern part of the Syria. So this is the region they want to target and basically bite into the Syrian sovereignty, potentially creating a problem in future between Syria and Turkey. And this whole map is a Syrian map. And if Turkey occupies that, we are in for trouble. There is some areas it's in green with dots. Those areas are where you have the ISIS presence. Northern part of the Syria is where you have the ISIS footprint. For example, in Manbij, in near Aleppo, further north of Aleppo, etc. You would have seen when this conflicts broke out, Idlib. These are the ISIS areas where the terrorists have been killed, and all with the help and support of the Peshmergas. And in fact, United States gave close to $700 million worth of aid and machinery for Peshmergas to support United States in taking the ISIS out as they tried to clean up Iraq, if you go back in time. Some of this we have covered, not all of it in the DGI. But this just tells you the next potpourri that is ready out in the to be out in the open very, very soon. Only a cabinet decision is stopping it. I think once they have the decision, we'll have the next war.
Oh my goodness! So let's hope that. Well, we'll see. It looks like it's almost imminent now. Islamic State militant ISIS militant Abu al-Hassan al-Hashmi al-Qureshi was killed in fighting. Its spokesman has said in an audio message. This is the last item for today, sir. If you want to weigh in on this, then we can call it a wrap.
No, I think this is go back to that area which we showed in the map. That's the area where he got killed in fighting the Syrian forces. Somewhere near the Manbij region to the left or the northwest region. That's where this thing has happened. And remember, this is the area near Idlib, is the area where we had the ISIS leader was what detonated himself, Abu Bakr, and then you had another Abu al-Qureshi, also the leader who succeeded him, was also compromised in this area, and much of it was done with American and the Kurdish forces, not with the Syrians. Syrians stayed away. So that's it. So I think that this is the area we wanted to point out because it's a cabinet decision. The cabinet decision is ready to come. Already the forces are lined up, so we can have another war just on the back of the Russia-Ukraine war at our footstep.
Thank you so much, Sridharji. And viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar, and we'll see you during the weekend on our market wrap-up.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. And thank you so much, Sriji.